Next, add them to a list. On People Factory, we created a new list every time. We're not going to create a new list for every dinosaur, right? We have one list. We're just going to create a new list item for each dinosaur. So we could have the list already on the page, just empty. So in the HTML, let's go ahead and put it there. After this div, which is the row containing our form, I'm going to put another row. And inside there, I'm going to make another div that once again takes up the middle 8 columns on medium screens and larger. So a class of medium 8, a class of medium offset 8, or 2, medium offset 2, and a class of column. And inside there, I'm going to create an unordered list with an ID of dino-list. In CSS, we tend to use dashes to separate words. In JavaScript, we usually camel case. Just trying to be consistent. So UL with an ID of dino-list. So back in app.js, we need to keep track of that list. We could hard code it in there somewhere. Or we could try to remain flexible and let the person who's using this decide. So pass it in with Append It. So if we did that and we just added a second argument, how would you know which argument's which? How would you know which order they're in? You could read some documentation, but that's kind of a pain in the neck. Anybody seen another pattern for doing something like this? Anybody predict what I'm going to do next? Instead of just passing 2 strings, I'm going to pass an object with a key, form selector, and another key, list selector. And that's going to be hash dino list. Still going to put my extra comma there. By doing it this way, we could put those in either order. A pretty common pattern. Okay, so form selector and list selector. So now how many arguments are we passing to init? Still just one. But instead of a string, it's an object, right? That object happens to contain a couple of strings. But the object is just one thing, so one argument to init. So up in init, instead of form selector, we have selectors, let's say. So instead of form selector here, we need selectors dot form selector. Make sense? So let's just keep track of, well, no, we don't need to, yeah. Let's keep track of the list as another property of our object, like this dot list equals document.query selector. What? Selectors dot list selector. Make sense? All right. So putting the list aside for the moment, how do we build the list item? We'll once again do it in a separate function, a separate method on our object. So after add dyno here, let's make another method called, we'll just call it render list item again. And it needs to know about that dinosaur, right? It needs to know the name and the ID, so we'll just pass in that whole dino object. And then what's it need to do? Create a list item. How do we create a list item? How do we create a list item? Maybe they didn't hear you in the back. Maybe they should repeat it to prove that they heard you in the back. How do we do it? How do we create a list item from scratch? Evan? Yes. Evan, do you know? So we can append it once it exists, but to bake an apple pie from scratch, first you must create the universe, right? So, yeah. Document.create element. List item. Save that to a variable. You can name that li if you wanted to. I'm naming it item just to make the point that it doesn't have to have the same, it doesn't have to match this. It's just a name we're choosing. We'll set its text content for right now. Item.text content equals what? Not just dino, right? Dino's an object containing the ID and the name. If we want to set it to the name, how do we get the name? Dino.name, right? And let's make sure we return the item when we're done. And then instead of console logging stuff, let's call render list item. And that would be this dot render list item, right? Pass in this object right here. Okay. If we want to prove that that much works, we could console log that real quick. And what should get logged? An actual li, right? Let's see what happens. Refresh. T-Rex. There we go. An li with T-Rex in it. That's not really what we want to do with it. What do we want to do with it? Somebody kind of answered this to the previous question, I think. I forget who now. We want to append it to the list, right? And the list we already saved to this dot list. So down here in add dyno, if we save this to a variable, list item equals this render list item. Then we say this dot list dot append child. List item. Refresh. T-Rex. Yay. Allosaurus. Yay. Velociraptor. Velociraptor? Yeah. Neat. We've done this before. We're old pros at this. Come on, Dave. Give us a challenge. Jeez. All right, let's commit that much. Add dinosaurs to an unordered list. Push it real good.